Hello, I'm Ez, Easy Plays MTG. Just to kind of make my first video here, we have my pet cEDH deck that I've built over a good long while. So, commander is Osgir, the Reconstructor. We have companion Zirda, the Dawnwaker, so that each permanent card in my deck, including my commander, has activated abilities on that. Some of the notable misses that means for the deck building here with this display is I will not have Dockside Extortionist, I won't have Esper Sentinel, I won't have Urza Saga, no Underworld Breach. Those are some very popular cEDH staples that, because I've thrown that deck building restriction on here, those are things that I actually miss out on. But I'm just kind of gonna dive in on this then. Easiest thing to go with first then is we're gonna walk through the mana base here, right? So for starters, easy lands, command tower. Paths of the Dead, Cavern of Souls here, which more often than not I will actually have naming Elemental rather than Artificer for my commander, because what really matters here is Zirda. Zirda in the companion zone there is important to stick to the field in this deck. I actually only have 3 fetch lands: Arid Mesa, Scalding Tarn, and Marsh Flats. If you were interested in building this, you could probably alternate whichever fetch lands you wanted that have red or white to them. I just really only feel like I need these 2 additionals. I have Glittering Caves of Aglarond, or Gemstone Caverns. This is important in here because one of the primary things I want to attempt to do in this deck is get a 2 mana rock out on turn 1 to allow Osgir onto the field like right away. So getting a turn 1 mana rock such as Arcane Signet into a turn 2 Osgir is usually the ideal circumstance. Gemstone Caverns lets me get there if I'm not the starting player, so it's really just an auto include. Again, for a similar reason, Ancient Tomb, colorless mana. I don't really have a lot of stinginess needing colored mana except when it comes to casting Zirda. So Inventor's Fair, necessary for outletting to tutor out secondary piece for combo. I don't think I use it very often to just select an artifact out of my deck. Treasure Vault, if I happen to be waiting and run a risk of losing Zirda, Treasure Vault's an easy way to filter colorless mana into mass treasures to keep around, in addition to then generating colored mana. This is one of the artifact lands that are all in this deck because they are 0 mana artifacts that Osgir, paired up here, allows me to use that last ability on Osgir, pay 0, tap and exile artifact lands from my graveyard and make 2 copies of them. That's just basically paying 0 for 2 lands and 2 mana. Follow it up with Darksteel Citadel, an indestructible artifact land as well. I have my red-white lands here: Plateau, Spectator Seating, Sacred Foundry, Sunbaked Canyon, Battlefield Forge, Inspiring Vantage, Elegant Parlor. Enters tapped. It has the subtype, so it is fetchable, but the key thing here is when it enters the battlefield, surveil 1. Now, the important part about that surveil 1 is you can just throw whatever's on top of your library into the graveyard. Whatever that card is, I don't think there's been one time where I've kept the card on top of my library, because anything I'm throwing in my graveyard, that's card advantage for me. Then that's huge. All of the other red-white lands here are all important on entering untapped as well. Rustveil Bridge, again, artifact land. It may enter tapped, but the indestructibility on there, especially it being an artifact land, just throw it in the graveyard, pay 0 to get a couple lands invested in next turn on top of being indestructible. So if anybody happens to be running like land destruction, probably not going to get this one. So again, Great Furnace, Ancient Den, just kind of peas in a pod for that one. And then I run 3 of each of my basics, Mountains and Plains, because I don't need to top out my mana base. Having those basics in there can sometimes be more valuable than anything, just because they just enter the battlefield. It's pretty great. Next thing I want to go through is my fast mana here. So, over on this side, we have our 0 mana rocks. Mox Diamond, super important, can just pitch an artifact land, throw it right in my graveyard, and get that extra turn 1 mana. Super important. Mana Crypt is an auto include, just necessary for cEDH anyway, but having it in here is super great. Has a major potential for just Osgir, again at 0 mana. Same with Lotus Petal, auto include for cEDH, but being able to treasure use it and then sacrifice it for mana, use Osgir, you get 3 treasure value out of a single Lotus Petal. Super important. Now some of these next ones here, Chrome Mox, actually don't need Osgir as much. They're in here to be that second turn 1 mana, so that we can boost out a mana rock and have Osgir out ideally on turn 2. Same with Mox Opal being legendary. Sacrificing it or putting it in my grave doesn't do as much to resurrect with Osgir because I can only have one anyway. And then lastly here we have Jeweled Lotus, best outlet here for Osgir. Turn 1, land in Lotus. Turn 2, the first game action I want to take if Osgir is still around is immediately just make 2 Jeweled Lotus, because that's going to hinder anybody's interest in removing Osgir when I have 2 Jeweled Lotuses on the battlefield after that. Mana Vault, again, auto include here. The ability to just drop it on the field for that mana hits that turn 2 mana rock. The ping at my draw step often won't matter. The easiest way I can use this as well is just a straight mana boost. Play it, sack it to Osgir, resurrect for 2 mana vaults, netting myself a net of 7, but out of the mana vaults alone, if I have a pre-cost that I've already covered this one, I'm netting 8 mana out of that deal, and that's pretty huge when it comes to adding mana to my mana pool. Sol Ring, once again, just auto include. Sol Ring being able to tap for 2 with Osgir's first sacrifice ability, and then make 2 Sol Rings all pays for itself, which is pretty great. Milliken, this is probably less common seen in cEDH, but it's a 2 mana and it adds an additional colorless and it mills a card to help pay that mana ability. Milling a card, again, super important. Just digs through my library. If it's an artifact, great. Doesn't even matter. We have Mind Stone. Card advantage, again, it's a 2 mana rock, so if I can drop that turn 1, leaning towards Osgir turn 2. That's what we're looking for. Thought Vessel, Talisman of Conviction for colored pips. Same with Arcane Signet, which is just an auto include to begin with. Cold Steel Heart, I'm kind of still fenced on, but I'm not really losing much by having it come in tapped on turn 1. So it's stuck around because that's important to get another colored pip of my choice based on what I need. And then same here with Felwar Stone, colored mana, turn 2 mana rock, or 2 mana rock played on turn 1 is pretty phenomenal there. We're going to skip over this pile for now, and we're going to jump to my interaction pieces that I have here. So I have Wear and Tear. I'll probably format an English version over top of it here, but it's destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, with Fuse opting for me to play both of them, which is just good value for removal there. We have Red Blast, well, Red Elemental Blast, but hits the counter spells again. Primarily used to protect Zirda on cast, but just not having access to as much counter magic and blue being prominent in cEDH, for me, I needed to have this in here, as well as its partner Pyroblast. I also have Smelt, destroy target artifact. No, this doesn't hit the One Ring, which is seeing pretty much play in any cEDH deck, but 1 mana, destroy target artifact at instant speed can be very handy. At some time, maybe I'll use it to destroy something of mine, but I have yet to find use where that would be of value. It's meant to be interaction with the board state, not just playing around with my battlefield. Deflecting Swat, again, auto-include, especially looking at Zirda right out on the battlefield. Not Zirda, Osgir. Osgir on the battlefield right away. Deflecting Swat is just a staple. Some of our white spells, Path to Exile, land hurts, but that 1 mana pip allows me to just keep one thing untapped to be able to interact with the board state if things are happening. Same with Swords to Plowshares here. Surge of Salvation. You and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. Prevent all damage that black and or red sources would deal to creatures you control this turn. So this is huge. Believe it or not, this hexproof for everything I have can be a major player. If I intend to combo out and someone wants to bring in a Orcish Bowmasters, the easiest thing I can do here, great, I'm just hexproof. You can't target me whatsoever. Again, primary protection for Zirda for combo parts, but it's just super easy to just shove out there as protecting your board state. Dispatch, it's normally tap target creature, but in an artifact heavy deck like this, it's basically going to have the Metalcraft to exile instead, so that's just straight up. Same here, this is Mana Tithe, counter target spell, I'll put, same as in with Wear and Tear, I'll probably put an English one here, but it's counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. Actually, at Chicago Con in February, played a few games and successfully countered some spells, including a Collector Oof. So Mana Tithe, cEDH here, super valuable, not to be underestimated there. Erase, exile target enchantment. So the exile versus a destroy kind of thing is iffy, what have you, but just the 1 mana instant speed, exile and enchantment, whether that's Ristic Study, a food chain, anything that's just kind of happening, right? Erase hits that right away. Silence, staple. Shout out to my Princess Bride, Secret Lair, super awesome. Love that. Blacksmith skill. This one could maybe be on the fence, but target permanent gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. That's the important part. The second line of text for targeting artifact creature doesn't really matter. It's the hexproof and indestructible. So to be able to protect Osgir or Zirda, or any of my permanents, say if they're targeting something different, but I have also actually played a game where it was in my interest to keep a Collector Oof on the battlefield. And this is not restricted to a permanent I control. So I targeted to protect that Oof, and the game went on. It was absolutely niche and out of the blue play, but those are plays that Blacksmith skill will allow you to be able to do. And then Teferi's Protection. I don't play this very often in this deck. I don't know if it's just because I don't see it, but it's kind of a staple. You throw it in here, you'll be alright. More often than not, this may just be pitch fodder for Chrome Mox or Gemstone Caverns. Just because, well, I'm not really expecting to want this. I want to feed my gameplay. So, set that down. Going into my utility, I have these two set aside up here because they're different. We have Ranger Captain of Eos and Jeska's Will. Ranger Captain, the ETB to search for a creature card mana value 1 or less, put it to hand, This is just acting as a tutor for the Walking Ballista. It's the only target that can get with that, but to be able to just play it and auto sack for the silence effect on non-creature spells to Walking Ballista usually means it's a GG. Jessica's Will also kind of an auto include for commander decks, especially with a mana boost of, playing into blue players who are drawing a lot of cards. Add a red, super, super valuable. And Osgir is often on the battlefield for getting the top 3 cards in my library this turn. And that's potent. That is potent. The rest of my utility here, Welding Jar, just to have the regenerate target artifact. I have Voltaic and Manifold Key here. They are mana boosters for things like even a Soul Ring and Mana Crypt. They act as just 1 mana tappers. But then you get into things like the Monoliths or Mana Vault, and they just output that mana. This is very valuable. Unlicensed Hearse, super important to have this in here just because it's able to interact with the graveyard shenanigans that go on in cEDH, whether that's Crick, where pretty much everything there revolves around playing into the graveyard, or perhaps it's Underworld Breach going on. Unlicensed Hearse just kind of mitigates what's going on with those graveyard plays, helps restrict what their options are, what the right plays they need to make. We have Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots. I've been on the fence about pulling Swiftfoot Boots every once in a while, but the ability to just hasten things and protect it with hexproof, super important. Lightning Greaves, again, with the 0 equip cost, kind of crucial to have. Patriarch Seal. It adds for 1 mana of any color, as well as untapping target legendary creature I control. Now, that's important for Osgir here, because it allows me to utilize Osgir twice in a turn. A lot of times what I actually do is I end up playing this, untapping Osgir, sacrifice it to put it to my graveyard, and use Osgir to make 2 copies of it, so I'm netting myself a usage on top of that. And then Karn the Great Creator. Activate, so it's activated abilities, artifacts your opponent's control can't be activated. It's my-sided Collector Oof. The +1 kind of doesn't matter. I actually care a lot more about the -2, which is you may choose an artifact card you own from outside the game, or in exile, reveal that card and put it into your hand. So when I use Osgir's second ability down here, exiling an artifact card from my graveyard and creating 2 tokens, if I play Karn and use that -2, I'm able to bring one of the exiled artifacts back to my hand and continue to boost with that mana, and that's honestly real big effect. I know the static is usually what's important on Karn the Great Creator, and it still is, but that ability to bring artifacts I've exiled back is also valuable to me. I'm going to have my card draw here, where we have Mishra's Bauble. We have Sensei's Divining Top, because that's an auto-include, has potential as one of my combo outlets, should it need be. Paleontologist Pickaxe, 2 mana equipment. Whenever equipped creature attacks, draw a card, then discard a card with equip 1, and it has the craft ability, which I don't usually care about, but I'll still cover here in a little bit. So this is important to have in here because it's looting with Osgir. Discarding artifacts to my graveyard, like the artifact lands, having the vigilance, being able to utilize that both ways, just digging through my deck, super important. I have discovered, however, that the craft with 1 or more creatures into Dinosaur Headdress, should Zirda get removed and get stuck in my graveyard for whatever reason, I can exile it with the craft ability, and underneath the Dinosaur Headdress make something else Zirda when it equips. And that allows me to protect Zirda in some manners, which is kind of secured Paleontologist Pickaxe's location in my deck here. Again, the front facing is usually all I care about, but if I need to, that back face is a way to secure my outlet regardless. Commander Sphere. This is honestly in here, even though it's a 3 mana and taps for 1 of any color. My commander's color identity, it's just here in the auto sack because I want to be able to play it, sack to draw a card. I can float that mana, which is awesome, but being able to just auto sack for a card draw, as well as use Osgir to net maybe 3 cards off that is great. The One Ring, like I've said, this is getting a lot of cEDH play, and this is going to be no exception. The protection from everything is pretty great, but it's that tap for drawing that matters a lot, and that's part of the reason why the keys have stayed in my deck, as well as being able to maximize it with the One Ring. And then I have 3 discard effects here for red spells. Faithless Looting, just kind of a need to be in here when I care about some artifacts in my graveyard. The ability to flashback also is great. Faithless Salvaging, the rebound, so it acts pretty much as a Faithless Looting at 1 more mana and instant speed. But I have found that since discarding a card is part of that first effect, if this is the only card in my hand, I will basically draw a card. And that can be very valuable if you're running empty-handed and top deck this anyway. And the last I have Demand Answers, which has the alternate cost of discarding card or sacrificing an artifact for drawing 2 cards at instant speed. Both of which are ways to put artifact to my grave with Osgir. Now, for the real meat here, the combo cards. Basalt Monolith, Grim Monolith. These function with Zirda, which is a cost reducer to the untapping, netting positive colorless mana each time I'm using them. So the goal here is to get this with Zirda, and I can generate infinite colorless from there, but Grim Monolith works a lot better most times because I get to have Osgir on the battlefield, cast Grim Monolith, and I'm net out of that going to end up paying 2 for 6 colorless between Osgir's ability to sacrifice it and Osgir's ability to make 2 token copies of it. That gives me access with 2 Grim Monoliths to not only add Zirda to my hand from Companion Zone, but also to have the 2 colorless floating remaining to activate once to untap a Grim Monolith to begin the loop. That said, my primary outlet card that I have is Staff of Domination, just to draw cards, get my library, but it's also to gain life. That life gain effect is important because that will draw me into Aetherflux Reservoir, be able to win that route. Staff of Completion is the kind of counterpart to Staff of Domination, but it just serves as an infinite outlet as long as I pay life to draw a card. Ideally, great, I'll find a way to get to Staff of Domination without blowing my life total too low kind of thing, but it's an auto-include for that outlet loop. For some of the finishers in here, I mentioned Aetherflux Reservoir. Mystic Forge, with colorless mana, I can just start playing cards off the top of my library. Same reason with Experimental Frenzy being in here, I can play whatever. These 2, along with Top, Sensei's Divining Top, allow me to get my library into my hand, essentially. And from there, I can play with relative ease. Words of War. It's a 2 and a red to cast Enchantment, and it has the activated ability to replace the next draw that I have this turn with 2 damage to target creature or player instead. I'm fairly certain the Oracle text would be to any target, but the effect here is what I'm looking for, and that activated ability is why it can stay in here with the Zirda companionship. But with Staff of Domination, if Aetherflux doesn't work out, guess what? I have Words of War as a secondary where I can activate Staff, hold priority, activate this to replace the draw, and just dish out the damage to kill my opponents. After playing at MagicCon Chicago as well, I realized I don't have Walking Ballista. I don't know why I had missed out on Walking Ballista, but here we are now. Walking Ballista, Triskelion, Heliod, Suncrowned. Because they all have activated abilities, I may as well include them in here. I don't know why that was something that I overlooked as I was building this up to a cEDH. But I did, and now it's in here, and so that's good. Walking Ballista, if I have the infinite colorless, okay, phenomenal. We'll drop it into play and just shoot it out. Triskelion requires the Heliod in here. Heliod is honestly not just a bad play, because I can give Osgir lifelink as well, so if my life is looking a little low, that Vigilant ability is coming in clutch, really, with the +1/+1 counters from Heliod as well. Lastly, for the deck's tutors, Thran Spider, infinite mana outlet, because with the activated ability, I can get all the artifacts out of my library, which will include the Staff of Domination to get me everything else I need. It does have the small drawback of the ETB. You and target opponent each create a tapped Power Stone token. Realistically, I'm not that concerned about giving any opponent a Power Stone token. They can at most use it to pay attacks, whether it's a Rhystic Study, pay into a fish, what have you. But a 2/4 reach body is also a good deal there. Kuldotha Forge Master. I go back and forth on this every once in a while, but odds are if I'm at a point where I just need the outlet, I need this tutor to be able to find Staff of Domination and finish the game. Oswald Fiddlebender, 1 and a white. It's a Birthing Pot effect, so it's white, tap, sacrifice an artifact, and then I'll search for an artifact mana value +1 to what I sacrificed and put it straight to battlefield. This works really well, just getting out Basalt or Grim Monolith. The only drawback on that is it activates only as a sorcery, so you can play it, and there might be response time, but then on your next turn you'll have to use this, and there could be responses there, but too good to pass up throwing artifact in my grave and getting combo piece out on the battlefield. Moonsilver Key, tutor for an artifact with a mana ability is basically what this reads. Searching for a basic land is irrelevant when I can get Grim or Basalt Monolith. Karn Living Legacy. All in all, the only thing that matters here is the middle ability -1, where I can pay any amount of mana, aka 100 mana, to go through my library, and I just put 1 card into my hand. It's an infinite mana tutor into Staff of Domination. That's all I need. Ring of 3 Wishes, similarly, I don't care that it comes in with 3, I care that it's all colorless mana across the board, so I can just drop it on the field, pay the mana, search for Staff of Domination. Gamble, putting an artifact in my graveyard, or even if I'm discarding any interaction, small cost to pay for getting a combo card out. Reckless Handling, it's a gamble for an artifact, so sure, it's revealing information to the board, but ideally that's not going to matter. Even if I discard an artifact, this 2 damage to each opponent is irrelevant. It's just the gamble effect that's crucial for the deck. Enlightened Tutor, and auto-include for cEDH like this. Searching for an artifact, the enchantment doesn't matter, it's just going to be artifact. A lot of times this is just go get Mana Crypt. Mana Crypt on top, great, we can play from there, boost mana, go crazy, and that's phenomenal to be able to just upkeep, get Mana Crypt, and roll out from there. The final selections that I have over here that I skipped over earlier are kind of some of my unsure slots yet. They're still staying in here. They're good to have in the build, but that I might be able to filter out as better options become available. Kozilek, the Great Distortion, a 10 mana, sure. But when I'm boosting mana, if I'm out of gas at that point, just casting this, whether it resolves or not, is irrelevant to me. But to be able to just get the hand refresh, that's phenomenal. But Kozilek can be in the deck with the Zirda companionship because of that last ability, giving me some manipulation over the what spells resolve in the battlefield based on mana values of cards in my hand as well. Mox Tantalite. This is stayed in here because that turn 3 extra colored pip can be pretty good. Ideally, this is just discard fodder so that I can throw it in my graveyard and activate Osgir for 0 mana to make 2 copies of it. That's the important piece. But if something more playable becomes kind of available, this is probably something that I will drop out. But until then, I'm okay keeping this in here for those colored pips that I can make. Silent Gravestone. Cards in graveyards can't be the targets of spells or abilities. That can be important to shut off some reanimator effects. It doesn't shut off Underworld Breach. And that's one of the drawbacks I've seen of late for me. The ability to pay mana and exile all graveyards and draw a card, I haven't really used a whole lot. It's just putting this on the battlefield, especially being 1 mana, is really nice, helps activate Nettlecraft. That's usually what I'm looking for. Hedron Archive. This is just an auto draw when I hit the infinite mana. I'm not looking to do much else with it. It can be very valuable to just Osgir into the battlefield if I have the big mana early. And having 2 Hedron Archives early in the game can boost me long term, but ideally it's just going to draw cards. So if I can find effects that just tutor better like this, that's really what we're looking for. Everybody Lives. For 1 and a white instant, all creatures gain hexproof and indestructible. Players gain hexproof until end of turn. Players can't lose life, and players can't lose or win the game this turn. I've honestly got this in here mostly as an anti-Thoracle. So say I'm not planning on interacting with the Demonic Consultation, not interacting with Thoracle itself, but they exile their library and I play Everybody Lives. Should they let it, if they don't have the interaction for it, they just emptied their library and they can't win the game. I don't play it very often. That's the drawback, is I just can't seem to find good timing to actually utilize it. And so that's one of my concerns and why it's in this kind of iffy collection here. Vanquish the Horde. 6, not usually. It's basically going to be close to this double white casting cost, since it costs 1 less for each creature on the battlefield to destroy all creatures. This was something I threw in after Chicago Con. I'm really not sure if it's going to stay in here, being the singular creature wipe in the deck. Sometimes it may as well just be the Chrome Mox feed. Often destroying all creatures is not unwanted when I'm playing it, but just as an actual singleton for the deck as a whole makes it kind of unsure if it should stay in the deck or not. But that's what this pile here is. If you have any questions or anything you want to feedback, this is kind of a pet deck that I've built up from the Osgir Precon that I just kept powering up and got to a point where I was like, you know what? Let's class this up to a cEDH. And I do win games. It's super powerful. Being in Boros and cEDH can be a very psych game with your opponents. But this interaction here is very potent. Like, I've played games where that interaction first came from me, where they were like, whoa, the Boros player has the interaction here. And that can be a huge put-off for the folks in the game. But let me know what you think. Like, comment, whatever. But this has been cEDH Osgir Zirda. See you next time.